The streets of Rosewick always smelled faintly of rain, even on sunny days. It was one of those small towns where people still knew the postman by name, and where every shop door had a little brass bell above it. In early spring, when the sun broke through the clouds, the whole town seemed to glow, cobblestones shining, window glass catching the light, the air soft with the scent of fresh earth. Inside Bennett and Company Taylor's, it was quieter than the streets outside. The smell of cedar and fabric dye lingered in the air, the kind of scent that carried years of careful work. Mira Bennett, sleeves rolled to her elbows, had been there since sunrise. Her grandfather's shop had always been more than a place to sew clothes. To Mira, it was a space that held memories stitched into every corner, the drawers filled with labeled buttons, the uneven floorboard near the counter that creaked no matter how lightly you stepped, the sunlight that pooled in the same spot by the front window every morning. She was on a step stool, dusting the top shelf where rolls of fabric rested like sleeping giants. As she reached for a box tucked into the far corner, her elbow brushed an old wooden hook she hadn't noticed before. Something slid loose. It fell to the floor with a soft, solid thud. Mira climbed down and bent to pick it up. It was a belt, dark brown leather, worn smooth in places, with a silver buckle dulled by time. 2 small cracks ran near one of the holes. It looked like it had belonged to someone who had worn it every day, year after year. She ran her fingers over the leather. She couldn't remember seeing it before. That alone was strange. Mira knew every inch of the shop, it was her second home. The bell above the door chimed. She straightened, belt in hand. A man stepped inside. The door closed behind him, and for a moment, the sunlight from outside framed him like the opening of a story. He was tall, with a faded blue work shirt and sleeves rolled high enough to reveal arms dusted with sawdust. His boots tapped a steady rhythm across the wooden floor. When his eyes landed on the belt, something shifted in his expression. His gaze lingered there for a heartbeat, then rose to meet hers. And there it was, that look. It wasn't shock exactly, and it wasn't simple recognition either. It was deeper, as if he had just stumbled upon a piece of himself he thought was gone. "You found it," he said softly. Mira blinked. "This? It just fell from a hook. I was cleaning." He took a slow step forward. "It's mine." "Well, it was my father's. I thought it was lost years ago." "You must be Elias Carter," he said, offering the name like it might open a locked door. "Your grandfather and mine worked together here when I was a kid. I used to spend more time in this shop than in my own house." The name tugged at a memory. Her grandfather had once told her about a boy who could sew straighter than most grown men, a boy who had a way of making even the sternest customers smile. But that had been more than a decade ago. "This shop keeps more than just fabric," she said quietly. "Looks like it kept something for you too." Over the next week, Elias returned. At first, it was under the guise of errands, a jar of old buttons he swore belonged here, a spool of thread that looked lonely, in his workshop, a notebook of hand-stitched patterns that must have been her grandfather's. But Mira knew better. These visits weren't about things. The shop had been slow lately, the bell above the door ringing less often. Having someone to talk to, someone who understood the history of this place without explanation, was comfortable. On a rainy afternoon, they sat together at the work table, piecing scraps of fabric into the beginnings of a quilt. The rain tapped against the windows, the iron gave off its soft hiss, and conversation came in easy waves. "Your grandfather taught me patience," Elias said, pressing a seam flat. "He used to tell me, good work isn't rushed. Neither is a good life." Mira smiled. "He told me that too. Usually when I was standing by the oven waiting for biscuits." Elias chuckled, and for a moment the years between them folded away like neatly stacked cloth. A few days later, while sunlight spilled across the counter, Mira asked, "Why does this belt matter so much to you?" Elias turned it over in his hands, leather creaking faintly. "My father wore it to work every day. He said it reminded him of what he was working for, the family waiting for him at home. When I was 16, I borrowed it without asking. I left it here one afternoon after helping your grandfather with a hem. By the time I came back, it was gone. I thought I'd lost it forever. And now it's here again. He looked at her then, a slow, steady gaze. Some things find their way back when you're ready for them. Mira wasn't sure if he was talking about the belt. When autumn came, the air in Rosewick turned crisp, and the festival filled the streets with music and light. Mira had planned to stay in, crowds weren't her favorite, but Elias arrived at the shop with 2 cups of hot cider. You can't spend tonight in here, he said, smiling like he already knew she'd agree. They walked together through streets strung with lanterns. The glow reflected in shop windows, the air thick with the scent of roasted chestnuts and cinnamon. Children darted past with ribbons trailing behind them, laughter spilling into the night air. At the edge of the square stood the old oak, its branches heavy with swaying lanterns. My father brought me here every year, Elias said. He told me to find the brightest lantern and make a wish with someone who mattered. Said it might just come true. Myra's eyes followed the light. And which one's the brightest? Elias didn't glance up. Depends who you're standing with. Her breath caught, and she turned toward the crowd, hiding the flush in her cheeks. Winter arrived quietly, snow layering the streets in white. Business slowed, and the shop's warmth became a haven against the wind outside. Elias still visited, sometimes helping with orders, sometimes just sitting across the table while they worked in companionable silence. One evening, as she locked up, Mira caught her foot on the edge of the rug by the counter. She stumbled, but Elias's hand caught her elbow before she fell. Their eyes met. His gaze was steady, certain, warm. It was the same look as that first day. The first heavy snow in February brought a surprise. Elias walked in carrying the belt. It had been cleaned, the cracks mended, the buckle polished. I fixed it, he said simply. But I think you should have it. She shook her head. It's your family's. He set it on the counter between them. Maybe our stories are starting to share the same pages. What if I'm not ready? She asked. He smiled faintly. Then I'll wait. Good things aren't rushed. Outside, snow fell thick against the windows, muting the world beyond. When spring returned, the frost melted into rain, and rain into bright mornings smelling of fresh earth. On the first day of the market season, Mira wore the belt. Not because she needed it, but because it felt like carrying something steady and sure. Across the market square, she saw Elias. When his eyes found hers, that look returned, the same one from the day they met again. Only now, she knew exactly what it meant. Some things find their way back when you're ready. And she was.